So after finishing my fight with Ganondorf, I actually did decide to delve back into Hyrule and finish up all the stuff that I didn't finish. I put in 100 hours or so completing the main quest and the main story arcs and all that. But there's still a number of shrines I hadn't been to yet. Hadn't finished the depths, which are quite large. So I went back and I put in another 60 hours into the game or so. 60 hours or so more. So it was like maybe 160, 165 plus gameplay, game through, playthrough. And, I do think, I stand by everything I said about the game. Everything in the first 100 hours, the storyline being terrible, gameplay being not that exciting. But I do have to say, after delving back into the game and just being able to ignore all the story because there was no more story to partake in for the most part, except for some minor quest dialogues. Just being able to ignore the story, being used to all the new things in the game. The end game, I would say the late game, end game of Tears of the Kingdom, more enjoyable than the early game. And I still think, if it takes 100 hours for the game to become enjoyable, well, that's not good. And probably even more than 100 hours. Maybe it was probably around the 110, 120 hour mark when I started to think, there's some enjoyable aspects to this game. But it did happen eventually. Maybe I just got Stockholm syndrome or something. But it did kind of get to me, and I started to feel the same way as I felt playing Tears of the Kingdom or playing Breath of the Wild, playing Tears of the Kingdom, which I was glad about. And I do start to see where Nintendo is coming from with some aspects of it. Still not sure about the Zonai, though. I'm starting to kind of come to terms with the Zonai as well. But definitely more palatable. Playing in the depths, going through, once I really started to try and uncover all the secrets held in the depths, do all the arenas and whatnot down there, see what's down there. Still huge map, mostly boring, mostly the same. But you start to find it relaxing, just going down there, donning on your gloom armor, and looking like a little goblin, running around in the dark. And, I started enjoying it. Wearing my light, the miner's suit, which lights up. Just kind of going around in the dark. Sometimes I would just not wear anything and just fly through the darkness and just try and find my way to the next light route without anything. Definitely got better, got easier going through it with once you have more hearts and you have it properly equipped, and you get to know the map a little bit better too, because you can use the upper map to direct your way to the lower map. One of the biggest challenges, I think, navigating the gloom in the first portion of the game was not really understanding how the upper map correlates to the lower map, where the rivers will represent walls that will go forever. Once I realized that, though, you can kind of avoid the rivers, and it becomes easier to navigate in the darkness. So, as you just learn the little secrets of the gloom-ridden depths, the game did get a little more enjoyable. Got a little easier, got a little more peaceful for me, and went through and got all the light routes. And, I did actually start to appreciate the light routes as well, because the light routes then inform you of where there are shrines up above, and some of those shrines were so dang hard to find that I do think it's kind of a pain in the ass how hard they made it to find some of these shrines, with all the caves and whatnot. But knowing where they are because of the light routes helped a lot. It makes it much easier to find it, even ones that wouldn't even show up on your shrine radar because you need to do quests to do them. So, there were some, little hidden gems with the shrine quests that, clearly you either had to stumble on them and they're in areas where you might not necessarily go unless you're looking, or you had to use the light routes to find them. So they did kind of think about that. The very late game shrines, some of them were kind of interesting. Um, and the caves, I started to appreciate some of the caves too, actually. Got used to cave dwelling, cave delving, spelunking, and, collecting gear at the end, because I wanted to get all the gear that I missed out on. A lot of that was in caves. Started to find some of the Misco caves were actually very interesting too. I liked especially the lazy river caves, or the lazy lava river caves. A lot of caves just around that were actually interesting. A lot still that were not interesting. And I did not go into every cave, and I did not complete every cave. But I did get all the gear from the caves. I think so. For the most part anyway. And just going through and getting all that final gear, all that stuff that it didn't really quite get, like the climber set and the rubber set and all those sets, and finding each cave kind of had its own little personality. Each cave was a really miniature Zelda dungeon on its own too. Most of them didn't require any switches or whatnot. For the most part, but still, the caves, they were all interesting. Or not all of them, but many of them were interesting. Some of them were interesting. The ones with the treasure chest, anyway. Some of them had something a little bit more that was, I thought, made it more interesting to go into and delve into, which made, even at the end of the game when I had finished all the shrines and gotten all the light roots in the depths, and I was just collecting gear at that point, it was still felt worth it to keep going. And I would say, like, the story was really one of the biggest bummers from the game, and since there was no longer any story, there was nothing getting in the way of enjoying the game. So I did find that the late game of Zelda was better and more with the previous game than the early game. So I will give the game that. It gave me another 60 hours of gameplay, so I guess that's not too surprising. And the Zonai, so as I've been investigating and trying to rectify what the Zonai are and how they fit with the rest of the Zelda line, I realize that they just don't. But that's okay, I think what we are entering into in Zelda is, it's a multiverse situation now, where before we tried to kind of rectify everything on a single timeline or parallel timelines. We're just multiverse now. And I think it makes a lot of sense, I think the game even kind of went in a direction like 1Q84 Murakami. I hate that book, by the way. Couldn't finish it. Got sick of listening to the main character whine about having sex with bald men. Very boring book. Don't read it. But in that book, the character kind of enters into a subtly shifting reality. And that's like what Zelda is. Like, in this Tears of the Kingdom, I think when they interacted with Gloom Ganondorf below the castle, I think they got shifted to another timeline, to another universe, one where the Zonai do exist. So they're in a parallel universe with the Zonai. They're in a parallel universe with the Zonai. And, when you get into parallel universes, really anything's possible. So there's no reason to get worked up about, goddesses or Zonai or who came first or what. And, really maybe every Zelda game is actually in this parallel universe when it comes down to it. Even if you go back to Majora, which was the only other direct sequel on a console to a game, even in that one, there was a change in universe. We just didn't really recognize it. Link goes through the mists and enters into a parallel termina. Thought maybe it was somewhere else, or we didn't really know what happened, but it was really a parallel universe too. So it's always been a multiverse, actually, but I think it's time to stop trying to make everything fit together and let them exist in isolation. But you know, and you're thinking about that, you know, it's a little bit less unsettling when going back to the house that you got in Breath of the Wild. You find that there's still only a single bed with a single pillow, but now rather than Link stuff in there, it's just Zelda stuff for some reason. It's like, what happened with that? Did he sell his house? Did Zelda just take it from him? Is he renting to her? Is he leasing it? Is he her landlord? Why is Zelda's stuff all over Link's house? Um, but you know, he gets to make his own house again, so he gets the new house in this one. And you know, after putting in 160 hours into this one, which I've had a very mixed relationship with, really mixed feelings, but you know, I would say that at the end of the game, you know, I did just feel like taking Link back to his new house, since his old one was taken over, taking Link back to his new house, and I guess perhaps he's in an alternate reality now. I'm not sure, but you know, he's still got a lot going on, so he can just keep going forward, and you know, going back to the house, feeling cozy, putting on some PJs, and putting the game to rest. It felt good. Felt a good amount of closure from that, and it was a nice way to end the game. And you know, I don't think that the game is good, but if you know, you can put up with it for 110, 120 hours. The very late game is very peaceful and very Breath of the Wild-esque. So I think that is worth noting about the game, and you know, that's really where you can feel where it feels more like a Zelda game. Anyway, those are my thoughts, my final thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom. It's been a journey. I'll see you guys later.